Welcome to Abundance. You guessed it, a podcast dedicated to all things surrounding dance. I am Kristen.
And I am Hannah, and we are two best friends who are brought together by this art form.
Please join us in 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, hello everyone. We are back with our third interview today.
Yes, today we have a very special guest, very near and dear to my heart, from my childhood up and through right until college. And now since COVID time, I was back dancing with her, and that's been just such a special thing for me. So I want to introduce you today to Laurie Deyo. And Laurie, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what you do right now?
What I do right now is I am retired from Syracuse University. I was there for 30 years. Half of that was dance faculty. And then as injuries started happening and whatever, as they've just continued to happen, I went into advising and recruitment. Still stayed there. And so I retired from there and I'm teaching at two different dance studios. I teach modern. I've taught jazz and ballet and whatever, but modern is my thing. So that's what I'm doing now. I hail from Michigan, long time ago. Um, yeah, so right now I'm just kind of hanging out and teaching a little bit and trying somehow to enjoy life in some way, shape, or form. You know.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. And one of the reasons why I got into modern was from taking your classes because I loved them so much. So we're just so excited to have you on today to talk to us a little bit about your career.
Well,
So
thank you. This should be fun.
yeah.
Yes, I can still remember you in my beginning when you first started taking modern.
I was the little ballerina who
You're just a little bit of a ballerina. Yes, yes, you were. But that's okay.
yeah, I grew out of it. All right. Well, so I was just wondering, you were involved with theater and sports when you were younger. How did you decide to get into dance?
Yeah, I was not a dancer. I did not grow up in the world of dance. I was very physical. My mom coached and was an athlete and also was a singer, recorded stuff in New York City. So my whole background was athletics and music. Um, and so I could throw a football better than any guy that I knew. I could play baseball and softball, and I grew up by Lake Michigan, so we swam. But I also did a lot of my music, and singing was huge, but I started out like in fourth grade playing the violin, decided not to do that, shifted to the cello, decided I didn't want to do that. So my parents gave me one last shot and they said, you got one more instrument. And I took the flute and I stayed with that. And so between fluting and singing, and then playing whatever sports I could, I ended up in seventh grade trying out, and I took acrobatic lessons, so I learned how to do like walkovers and just basic gymnastic stuff. But I remember when I was taking my acrobatic lessons, as they called them back there, it was pretty much gymnastics. My friends would stay for a ballet class. Now this was probably when I was in seventh or eighth grade, maybe. Yeah, but they would stay for this ballet class that I just thought was a joke. I just thought it was the most ridiculous. I mean, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what they were doing. I thought, okay, whatever. So I never stayed for it. Never really had any desire to. But the acrobatics was good. So I ended up being a cheerleader, with my gymnastics and stuff. But in seventh grade, I also did somebody talked me into trying out for the drum majorette of our seventh and eighth grade marching band. So I could twirl a baton. I'd taken baton lessons for whatever. And the band leader, back in seventh grade, chose me to be the drum majorette of the band. Now, mind you, I didn't know what I was doing, but I definitely knew my music. He knew me because I played flute and I sang and everything when I was in seventh grade. And so he chose me, much to the dismay of the other young ladies who were vying for that role, for marching. But I think he picked me because he knew that I knew music and I was tall and thin, and not that the thin really had anything to do with it. I guess I was tall. So that kind of started a whole different pathway for me, when I was in high school. So I still was a cheerleader, did all that crazy stuff, did my music, but I was also marched with our marching bands, which were very, very good. And so that kind of worked its way up until when I was in high school, and ended up still with my flute, in wind ensemble, in concert band, sang in like 3 different groups, but most of my life was music. Played softball. I actually ran some track, did some crazy things like that. But also then in freshman year, the band that I went into was actually the band that was directed by this person who has just since passed away, and kind of took a piece of my heart along with him. But he he was just the coolest person in the world. And at this point in time, my whole life was pretty much music. Again, very active, but I was going to be a musician. That's what I was going to do, and it was something I was very good at. But I also, when I got to be a junior, was able to then once again be the drum majorette for our marching band, which was very well known in southwestern Michigan. He would create songs and we would march for all kinds of different places, but I was from Holland, Michigan. So we had, being from Holland, Michigan, the Holland part, we had tulip time. And so we would also march for all these tulip time parades. So I was very physical in marching, which was pretty draining on a body because we would go for miles and miles and miles. But we'd have the music that was going, so we would dance. Like the majorettes and me would have these crazy routines that we made up. So I was dancing with it and loved it, absolutely loved it. It was like in seventh heaven. So basically I marched and danced with my marching from 7th grade through 12th grade. But never took a dance class, had no idea what that was. Did fire baton. Actually, my junior year, I did a fire baton thing. So anyway, so my high school life was wonderful. I loved it. I didn't want to leave. I had a good high school, a good junior high. A lot of my kids were ready to get out, like they always are. I wasn't. And I remember talking to, again, this mentor of mine right at the end of school, and I just told him, I said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go on. I don't want to do anything. I said, I remember telling him this was the best I could ever imagine anything to be, at 18 years old. And he told me, he said, Laurie, don't worry. There will be so many more things that open up to you. Little did I know how everything was going to change. But it was, should I keep going or do you want to ask me questions?
No, you're good. Yeah, talk about how you got into college and when you started dance.
So I got into, I was really late in deciding, but I went to school, to my home college called Hope College, which had an amazing music program. So I got into that, fine. But I decided after my freshman year that I didn't want to stay home. I wanted to go someplace. So I went all of 3 hours away from there to Central Michigan University, which is where my band director actually had been from. I transferred there and stayed with the flute. But before I went to college, I was 18, the summer of my, after my high school year, living by Lake Michigan, we would stay out at the beach. We grew up out around there. So, and I remember that summer, I had been with my high school boyfriend, literally from like the time I was in 8th grade and he was in 7th grade. We were together. We were best friends. And I remember there's a reason for this story. I remember being at his house and I had a pair of cutoff shorts on and probably a t-shirt on and whatever. And I remember looking in a mirror in his parents' house. And something in me, and I had nicknames: toothpick, skinny, flat, you name it. I was tall and skinny, didn't know, hated it, every minute of it. All through I would get teased on the bus when I was in elementary school because my knee socks would keep falling down because my legs were so thin. And so I remember, and I hated that, but I remember this one particular summer day, it was like in June, looking in the mirror and all of a sudden for some reason, hating what I saw. Because I saw this person that was almost 5'8", probably 114 pounds. I don't know, if even that, pretty thin. But I looked, in my mind, my thighs looked fatter, my everything, something clicked in my head that said, oh my gosh, I'm big. And I wasn't at all. But in my mind, whatever snapped, and I wasn't even a dancer yet, and I was doing this. Have no idea what it was. But I remember then that I thought, okay, I'm going to do something about it. Well, I didn't starve myself because I ate and I wanted to eat. So I got pretty messed up in my head. I got down, so that went into my freshman year of college. And then by the time I transferred, I was down to about 94 pounds. Now, back then, and I was 5'8", back then, anorexia was not a thing. So none of us had any idea what was going on. I didn't get my period for like 6 years from then on. So I went to Central Michigan University for 2 years. And when I was there, they had this group called Orchesis that was having a dance concert and had auditions. Well, I was doing everything in my mind to stay physical because I was at that point in my life, I was anorexic without even realizing it. So I was taking tennis classes and I was taking a track class and I was going out and I was eating very carefully what I would do, or I remember looking the night before to see what the next day's menu was, and I couldn't sleep at night because I was envisioning like they had these, this is really crazy, but this is what anorexic people do. They were having like whatever it was with these garlic buttery croutons that were delicious. And I can remember I could not wait until the next day when I could actually eat those. And I would then I started eating really weird, and I would go and that would be what I would eat for a meal. And so when I was at Central, that's when I was physical nuts. I joined a sorority. I was again down to like 94 pounds. But I auditioned for this Orchesis thing, had no idea what I was doing. And I remember I almost got in. And she came up to me. She said, Laurie, I'd never taken a dance class. I had no idea. She said, if you would take a couple of classes, you could do this. And I'm going, okay, whatever. I didn't know, but because I had done it because I wanted to stay active so I could stay thin. So I didn't get in, but it kind of was like a bug in my body. So that was my junior year in college. That was my first exposure to dance. My junior year in college. So I decided I was homesick. I wanted to go back home. So I transferred back to Hope College, where they had a dance minor. A man by the name of Ed Riffle, who had danced with the Chicago Ballet, and with Rich Ron, who had danced on Broadway, who did jazz and tap. They just had, and this was a small white Dutch Reformed church school. And they bring in these two guys who were partners. And back then, people who were gay, just, in my hometown, it was like very different. For me, I loved it. So I transferred back, dropped my whole major of music that I had done for 3 full years. I had like 70, almost 80 hours in music, dropped it, did whatever I could to just get a degree, and ended up with an elementary ed degree. I had a dance minor, I had a French minor, I had all these crazy things. And I wanted to take a dance class because I needed in my head to stay physical. And my mom had been in theater and was a coach and everything. And she said, well, take tap because tap is really fun. So I took ballet and tap. And I was very flexible. I could do a split. I could do all this kind of stuff. Well, I did that for a semester, and then I took jazz, and I was smitten. That was it. I was head over heels in love. Ballet was ballet. I had no idea what a turnout was, but I did it because I had been so active. I had been so physical and so coordinated that for me, dance just made sense. So here I've got my music coming in with my dance, and it was like in my mind a perfect world. So all of a sudden it's like, I have to do this. So I did everything I could with my dance. I did a ballet. We performed. We won they have these Midwest dance association performances where your professors actually choreograph stuff, and Ed and Rich choreographed this amazing piece that I was able to be in, and we won the choreography thing for that. But anyway, so I decided I had to go on and do more dance. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I just know that I was very good at what I did, and it was brand new, but I loved it because it was the combining of the two things that I was passionate about, which was being physical and my physical and athletic self, and my music. So I stayed a 5th year so that I was a 5-year undergrad, so I could get my dance minor. And then I applied to Texas Women's University and to NYU. Now, mind you, guys, I've been dancing for 2 years, and I'm applying to NYU for their dance It's like I've lost my mind. But my grades were so good from this school that was so prestigious and with one of my teachers from there who wrote a recommendation that was pretty glowing, I got into NYU. Now, I didn't do Tisch. There was no way. I didn't even know anything about it, but I got into the School of Ed. So, and I'm thrilled to death, and I'm just going, okay, now what? And I remember Ed and Rich, the two guys who were there, thought that I would be best in trying to take modern because I was so new to all this, and they said, that might really work well for you if you took a modern class. I didn't know what that was. So I went to the audition. I had to audition before I got in. Oh my God, you guys. I mean, I just think about how ridiculous I must have looked because I didn't know modern at all. I'd had basically 2 years of ballet. Well, what do you get with 2 years of ballet? And here I am at NYU auditioning for this program that people who've been dancing like you guys did your whole lives. And so, anyway, so I ended up getting into, they put me in more of the beginning classes. Of course they would, because I didn't know enough to be in an advanced class. But one of those beginning classes was Fred Matthews and modern. And he changed my life. End of conversation. He changed my life. I did not know what I was doing in that class. And I remember the one day he finally came up to me. He said, "What's your name?" It was, I don't know, a couple weeks into the semester. And he was doing these things, these parallel plies with tendus front, with the flex through and whatever. And now I do it in class, but I'm just trying to follow through. And I remember when he came over to me and again asked me my name, and then he took my pelvis, Hannah, and he pulled it up so that it was lengthened on top of my legs. He said, "Laurie, all of this needs to come from your pelvis." And I went, "Okay," because I was scared to death of even having him talk to me. That moment, everything changed. And I took his class every day. I took ballet. I took from David Howard. You name it, I went to the Joffrey. I was taking ballet classes every day. I was actually getting pretty good. Took jazz. I took jazz from NYU from people who had been on Broadway. And I mean, so I was getting exposed to some really wonderful stuff. Had I been where you guys were at that time in my life, I would have actually been really, really good. But I did this and I kept working. I remember one time Fred left, he got a message or a phone call, and we were doing stuff across the floor. Probably something similar to what I do, but whatever he was doing. And he said, "Laurie, keep it going." And so he had picked up on my musicality from way back in the beginning, and he left me in charge of these dancers, all of whom could dance better than I could. And he left me in charge of taking them through across the floor with the musician, who of course was live, because you had the good stuff back then. And it freaked me out, but it's like, whoa, okay. So that's kind of where it went. They went to Harvard for a summer thing. I followed them there and did more stuff. And I just kept working and working. One of the other classes I had at NYU was a beginning ballet class, but it really wasn't a beginning ballet class. It was more like ballet with the anatomy and physiology that goes with it. And that's where I learned so much stuff that I still use to this day about what's right and what's not right, and working through and where the rotators are and all that kind of stuff. And then I took anatomy physiology. But so, I many times wish that I could have gone back after I knew all that stuff, if I could go back now and take that all over again, because I would have learned so much more. But I was obsessed. And so I kept doing that. So when I was done with NYU, and I danced in a company there, and I was in a children's company, and I did a bunch of performance stuff, and I was also doing some education things for children's education and movement. So I was teaching in some of the schools. And so there's a lot of other things I was doing that kept me aligned to my goal of being able to teach. So I did all of that, and I was in love with the city, but I was done, and I wanted to go home. Not home, but I went back to New Jersey and commuted from there until I finished. And so then the spring that I was done, I had to take an extra year because I was so far behind in my dance stuff. I had a chance to do some modeling stuff, so we did some of that, which then made me, I remember my coursework kind of went down the drain for a while, but and I did some tap, and I taught some flute lessons, and I did all that stuff while I was there. I was working part-time. But then I moved to New Brunswick, which was away out of the city, but it was where friends of mine from my church were, and yada, yada, yada. So I remember getting on the train to go into the city, and there was this newspaper that had been read and thrown away, and it had this advertising for auditions for this place called Plays in the Park, which is a huge outdoor amphitheater for musical theater. All right, whatever. I think I'll audition. Well, that was where my other love of my life happened, and I auditioned, and because I can sing and I could dance, I got into a couple of the big shows, and these were huge, you guys. We had equity people coming in to do. We did Hello Dolly, I did Funny Girl. I was singing and dancing, and that to me was just that was it. That was even more than just my modern. So that I did more of my theater then. I had done one show in at Hope College back home in Holland. I had done Fiddler on the Roof, and I was one of the singers and dancers. And yeah, so anyway, so that all happened. And I'm trying to remember when this other part of my life happened. It was then at some point in time. But so anyway, so I auditioned, I got in doing shows, and then I remember that next year I literally did like 7 musical theater shows in one year. Like I was in Princeton, and I was in New Brunswick, and I was in Edison, and I was doing all these things. So that's what I did for that whole year. And then did West Side Story, and just and yeah, right, Laurie, what's the name of the other show? Anyway, a whole bunch of musical things. But along with all that, that was Jersey, and then I got married to my high school sweetheart. He had gone into politics and religion and chose religion as his thing to do. So he ended up graduating from New Brunswick Theological Seminary and got a church up in a place called High Falls, which is near Kingston, New York. I didn't want to go. I was in heaven. I was dancing. I was singing. I was doing very stupid things from a personal perspective. But I didn't want to go up with them, but I did. So long story short there, we moved up there, and there was a woman by the name of Sarah Cook who had danced with Balanchine, and she had a studio up there. So I started taking classes up there and started teaching for her. And then there was another woman, and I cannot remember her name, but she had Equity Theater in Connecticut, a dinner theater that was Equity. And she came to a performance that in Kingston, and I was chosen as one of the people to do one of the. It was somebody had choreographed something, and we performed it. This was along the same time when I was taking Graham classes, which I couldn't stand, but I was taking them, and more ballet and stuff. But at that performance, and I still have a picture of one of it. It was a jazz thing, and I performed, and this woman came up to me afterwards and told me she wanted me to audition for her Equity musical theater dinner theater, which kind of blew me away because that was pretty cool. So all these other little kids who've been dancing all their life, who I danced with, didn't get that, and she came up to me and said, "You've got this presence on stage. I want you to audition." So that was a whole different story, and I did go and audition. I got to go to the catacall. I got called in. The first show they needed somebody. It was for Can. I couldn't do fouette turns because I don't think I'd ever done one in my life, but I could sing, and so she told me to come back, and it was just kept being typecast. The next one, they wanted someone who was short and blonde. Well, I was tall and dark and whatever. So then I got scared and I stopped, and I wish I would not have, because I would have gotten my Equity card at some point in time, and I know that, but I didn't. And so I kept teaching, and then, yeah, things happened, and I got doing more shows and ended up getting divorced, and stayed in Kingston and met Kelsey's dad. And we moved up to Syracuse, and then I got into SU, and so things just kind of rolled from there. But I wasn't a dancer. I don't think I was supposed to be a dancer. I don't know what happened, but that's what happened, and I don't know. That's kind of how it was, but kind of weird, because I'll tell people that, and you know that, Hannah. And yeah, I didn't start dancing until I was in college, and they kind of look at me like, okay, but it's just a lesson of somebody there's a passion there, and you work hard and you figure it out. How many kids, and both you guys know this, how many kids that you guys started dancing with when you were little have stopped dancing altogether, because they burn out. I didn't burn out because I didn't have a burnout to do, it's a matter, I think, sometimes of people really working hard. I know that when you're young, that's when you work your turnout the best, because you're so young and pliable. I think because I had been a cheerleader and had marched and danced and done stuff, and because I was a cheerleader, I was flexible, not very strong, but I was very flexible. For whatever reason, I was lucky enough that rotation came easy to me. It doesn't always when somebody's older. So I was lucky in that regard, because I know even like my daughter, she struggles with it. She started dancing late as well. So I think it was just I was at the right place at the right time. When I started teaching at SU, I was teaching at Syracuse School of Dance, and I was teaching a couple of ballet classes, and one of the ones was for kids. I want to say like 7th and 8th graders. And I remember opening the doors. I opened the doors to let the kids out, and this man came right up to my face, literally scared the living daylights out of me, and said, "What's your name?" And I'm going, "Oh my God, what have I done? He's going to tell on me." I freaked out because he literally said, "What's your name?" He didn't say, "Hi, this is who I am." And I told him, and I said, "Oh my God, why?" And he said, "I'm Bernie Oliver. I'm the chair of the phys ed department, phys ed and dance department at Syracuse University." And he literally said, "I really like how you teach." And his daughters were in my class, which I didn't know. And he said he was losing one of the faculty and would I be interested? And I'm going, what do you mean would I be interested? Of course I'd be interested. That would actually be teaching at a university and teaching dance, which is what I had my master's in. So that's how I ended up. I was just at the right place at the right time. And he happened to be listening to what I was teaching, and he was an educator, and he liked, I don't know, however I was with the kids. And so that was kind of another changing point for me, because then that kind of began my true, teaching career at a university. And then everything evolved from there, and I'm back here
Wow.
teaching and
Very
hurt.
interesting background you have.
Very interesting.
I
Yeah.
think, like you said, everything you did, everything you were involved with music and your cheerleading and everything, all of those seem to really have fed into your dance career. Because like you said, the flexibility component, and even dance is so musical. So having that as a strong foundation probably made that transition of starting at an older age a lot easier and more natural for you. So
Most definitely. And again, for me, it was like I had found my home, because it was the two things that I loved the most was athletics and music. And somebody up there was pulling me, to make a decision, and I took it for the wrong reasons and then fell in love with it. But I had that one moment in my ex-husband's house, had that not flipped, it really, there was truly a switch that went off. It was very odd, and I can remember, and it's like, oh my gosh, what is this? But had that not happened, I often question what I would have ended up doing, because I don't think I would have danced, because that's the reason I wanted to find something to do that would keep me physical. And I was tired of playing tennis and running track and running hurdles and whatever. So yeah, it definitely led me to where they were the components that made me find something that worked for me. But I do often wonder what would have happened if I wouldn't have gotten into that weird place that made me take a dance class just because I wanted to be active.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that personal story. I had no idea that was the reason that got you into all of this.
And I got really thin too, but we didn't know. Doctors didn't know.
Yeah. But I guess the good thing that did come out of it is your dancing and your teaching, because you're a wonderful teacher and performer. And I've said to you a bunch of times, like, if you started dance earlier, you would for sure be in a big company in New York City. Like, I could just see that happening because of how you move and how, and I just think it has a lot to do with your growing up with, as Kristen was saying, the music and the sports and how it all just came together. But it is amazing how things just kind of unfold and how life brings us to these different points.
Oh, it truly is. Yeah, it truly is. It's just weird, and everybody's life journeys are different, as you well know. And you got to find your way. I remember when I was still home in Michigan, but I had been dancing. It's right before I came to New York. And friends of mine who had danced all of their lives, everybody I danced with there had danced like you guys had. It's like, who are you people? But they were talking about a chorus line that had just come out. At that point in time, I was not really in tune with theater, but I remember buying the CD and the Music in the Mirrors, that song. All I ever needed was the music in the mirror. I could still start crying when I hear it. That was another thing. I remember we drove to New York because a friend of mine, one of the guys that had been at Hope College in Holland, who was a wrestler who started dancing, was dancing with Joffrey Ballet. He just it was like he was a gymnast, and then everything just kind of happened. So we went and we stayed with him. But I remember that was another thing. Like, I went, when I was at NYU, then that next year, I went to see a chorus line. So I might have seen the original cast, but it's like, I went a couple times, and it was like $5 only, standing room only. You could just get in when you were a student for $5 and see these shows that were whatever. But yeah, but the funny thing is, Hannah, I don't know if I've ever told you this. If I had started younger and been trained, the thing that I really wish that I would have done, I would have wanted to be in like New York City Ballet. I would have wanted to dance on point and done that, because that still is an amazing thing to do. And that would be so, I think back if I had to do it again, and as much as I love my modern, and you know how much I love my modern, that's what I would be. I would have done. That's what I think in my mind that I would have wanted to do was to be a prima ballerina. I had the body type, I had the ability. I don't know if I had the stamina or, I haven't known because I didn't take that enough ballet. But anyway, but that's what I would do if I were to go back and do it again. How funny is that? Even though I love my Limon.
Yeah, I think you did mention that to me like once
Okay.
before. But
Yeah.
yeah, it is just so funny because you are so modern focused right now.
Yeah.
And especially with me growing up, when I was so focused on ballet and I was trying to do the modern, you would
Right.
on me for my ballet isms. And it's funny because you wouldn't think that that's something that you really would have wanted to pursue.
Right.
I always saw you as this like modern.
Right. This anti ballet person,
Yeah.
but I wasn't, and I love it, and I love watching
Yeah.
I
Course.
love watching ballet. They amaze me. They always will. As much as I love watching the Limon Company because they also just truly, they just completely amaze me. But yeah, that's what I would have tried to do.
That's awesome though.
Yeah, interesting story. Lots of things happened in between there. So that's my life in a nutshell. It's just kind of funny the fact that I ended up at SU on a fluke. Again, right place, right time, and that was a whole different thing because of all the kids when I advised them and all my dancers that I still stay in touch with who've gone back to California and gone wherever. When I was at SY at SU, and that's where all my big choreography started. That's like Metallica was there. I did a huge Pink Floyd piece that had like 300 light cues and stuff, and it's so dark that I can't redo it. But that's where I started doing some of my big pieces, and that just kind of continued through to everything I do now. But yep, right place, right time, and
Wow.
I know it's the same thing for you guys.
I'm curious, going back to NYU a little bit since we both have that in common.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot has changed over the years with the degree program
I'm
and
sure.
who is there in terms of faculty and all
Yeah.
of that and the course offerings. But did you do a specific track at NYU? Like, did you do the K through 12 certification
I did
or?
not. I did not because I don't. I did a lot of the classes. I did creative movement stuff. I did a whole bunch of classes that were focused toward that. Um, That's kind of funny, but I didn't that's probably what I probably didn't because I got really tired of teaching kids, little ones.
Mhm.
Got really burned out with that. But Kristen, that's funny. It was it wasn't I don't even remember what the track was. That's so terrible. Because it
They may
definitely
have,
wasn't just K through 12 because I
my
did
guess is that they probably changed the names over the years, but it's
yeah,
sounding like maybe what you did is what they call now the professions track.
that could be.
There's no like certification attached. So I was just curious, but like
Yeah,
I said, I'm sure a lot has changed over the years, and now
yeah,
they've added a new program for next year too. So,
of course they
but
have.
like you
Yeah, that's funny. It was just I should look on my quote unquote report card, my diploma. I just think it was dance and dance education. I think that was the title of what I did. I just wanted to make sure. I mean, I took a ton of different, teaching methods classes, pedagogy, but I also was able to take so many technique classes. But I don't remember. At that point in time, I'm not sure that the true K through 12 certification like it is now was there. I don't think it was the
Right.
same in New York State, in any state for that matter.
Mhm.
Um, but no, I didn't do that because there was a part of me that still loved performing and wanted to be on stage and didn't want to just teach. But yeah, I'm sure things have definitely changed. It's definitely changed. I mean, yeah, I don't even know who the chairperson is anymore. And now it's called, well, what isn't it called the Steinhardt? What is it called?
Yeah, it's through Steinhardt, but they do call it just like the dance education
Yeah,
program, but then there's
yeah,
the specific tracks within the program and the degree.
because
But
I
it's
don't,
interesting to
we
hear
didn't
about
have
your
that specific name
experiences
back
and
then.
how it differs now, because like I personally didn't have a lot of technique classes during my time there, so it's interesting to hear that yours was very technique heavy.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But now some of that could have been because I was so far behind that they let me take all these classes to get caught up, and then I just, but that may have been part of it. Oh, I remember, and I don't even know if the studios are there. I remember there's there's one building across, like next kind of like if you face the library, I'm assuming the library's still there.
Yes.
Facing the library, there's a building to the left
Hmm.
that we had studios upstairs in it. We rehearsed in, so I don't, and then there's in the main education building, I think the main education building, there's a place called Shimkin Hall. I don't know, but there was a place, I don't know. It's just, but I remember taking classes from like literally like from David Howard and Michelle, what was her name, doing a chorus line stuff. But I think the last time I was there, the buildings even looked different. So
Sure, yeah.
yeah. So
Crazy
I don't know. I
change.
don't know, but it was new for me. I had I think I had been to New York City a couple times with my parents because my dad was from New Jersey. But when I left Holland, Michigan, now you guys again, we're talking a very small, very white, Christian, Reformed, conservative town that lived was on Lake Michigan, so it was a resort town, but it was very I was very safe in my growing up, I'm sure. I left, went to New York, stayed with my grandma in New Jersey for a while, went into the city the first day with my cousin on a bus, got a job at a place called the Emotional Outlet. It was a clothing store. The very first day I went, got that job, and then found an apartment with my grandmother's friend's daughter, who I never knew, and just moved right into New York City, coming from I didn't know the subways. I didn't know what the city was. And just moved from this place that everybody just looked at me and said, "You're from where?" And I just moved right. So I must have been. I was on a mission. I was on a mission because It's not like I lived in Syracuse and knew the city because I didn't. I didn't know the city. I remember being at Rockefeller Center, but I didn't know it. I went right in there. That was it. Got a job, and and just kind of moved right in and learned my way around and I don't know. I just fell in love with it. Just fell in love with the city. But that was a whole nother experience. And a lot of people were really, really scared for me and wondering why I was doing this. But I got to tell you, it obviously coming from where I came from into a city that was so culturally diverse and wonderful in that regard, much more dangerous back then. I think the city has changed in a good way since I came. Um, but because I remember having to walk when I was commuting from New Brunswick, I remember having to get to Penn Station to get the train, and I would leave my rehearsals early because I was scared to death to walk by myself all the way up to Penn Station from down from NYU because it was much more dangerous back then. So I would wear my hooded sweatshirt and baggy jeans and have the hood up and have my backpack on and walk as fast as I could, so almost that people would think I was a guy instead of a woman because I was very, very scared. So I think that has changed. But yeah, it was a pretty bold endeavor that I did. I don't know, but it's like now, what I don't know, just my love for culture and diversity and this country and what we need to do differently would have probably never evolved for me if I would have stayed in my little white, you know, Dutch, wonderfully Dutch, but that background was so different in New York City and dance and everything that evolves and surrounds dance. We're all different, and I think we're so much more accepting of everybody. And that's not the culture I left, but that's the culture I came into, and for that I'm eternally grateful also. So that's another thing that happened is that change. I think who I was internally was meant for more like a New York City kind of place. I don't think I really believe some of the things that were happening in my little town, but so I'm glad I left. Yeah, it just interesting life.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear about that shift.
Yeah, yeah, it was a good one. It really was. I struggle going back home, even though I love home. I struggle because of I know where their beliefs are, and I know I probably better be careful because I don't know who's going to be listening to this podcast. But I just know that it's kind of a lot of what it still used to be, and that's not who I am anymore, and I'm glad for that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think right now is probably a good time to take a break.
Okay.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, and we're back. So, Laurie, I just want to know what's your favorite part about teaching at the Syracuse School of Dance, at the Ballet Dance Center, or even at Syracuse University when you did that? Or really throughout your entire life teaching? Like, is there one or two things that you really love about it that you could share with us?
Um, one of the things that evolved from my teaching was my love for choreographing and for seeing that come alive through my dancers on stage. So I have to think that probably, I mean, I just love teaching because I love seeing, and Hannah, you saw this a couple of weeks ago. I love seeing when somebody all of a sudden it clicks and you're going, oh my gosh, that just changed on his or her body. That I think is the most exciting thing. But it's also, and I'll get to the choreography in a minute, it's also when you have people who come back time and time again, not for me thinking, oh, I'm doing such a good job, but it tells me that they love what I'm giving them. And I think that's so like present that tells me that they not so much me maybe, but that they're connecting to the movement that I'm trying to put on their bodies. And that's very cool because that's what happened to me. But the choreography stuff, in I don't know. There's just when I think it happened when I really decided that I wasn't gonna perform so much anymore. But you know me. I mean, I've only one time have I ever performed any of my own choreography because I won't. So that started evolving at SU. And when I saw the stuff on stage and I went, wow. And when the kids came back to me and said, wow. So I knew that their experience on stage was what I felt it to be. That I think was that's kind of to me is the culmination of it. Now, mind you, everybody doesn't have to perform. Um, but I think at the time when I was at SU, so many people did, and we had the chance to choreograph and stuff. Um, I think for me, when I see and when I can make some kind of a, not a joke, that's not the right word, when I can make something that's serious be funny and help them understand, like when I've used you as a guinea pig and said, all right, you guys, what is she doing that, is or somebody else, when people will allow me to use them, quote unquote, as a guinea pig in a good way, in a learning to have that moment where both the person I use can understand what they might be doing, not wrong or differently, but how I want them to change it. But if I can make it to be fun and light and serious, but not so serious, then I think people come back also because they're not so intimidated and I can make mistakes. Oh my God, how many mistakes? So I think in teaching that's something that I don't know. I think people need to be vulnerable. I think teachers need to allow themselves to be vulnerable. But for me, it's the energy. It's knowing that people are actually enjoying what I'm giving them. Again, maybe they enjoy me, I don't know, but I know they enjoy the movement or they want to make it better because they want the cool thing is I think they want to do it, they want to make it better for me in a way, like you always do that for your teachers. You want to get better because you want to say, look at Fred, look at what I just did. I did what you wanted me to do. You want to impress your teachers, I think. And I don't know if that's the right attitude, but I think we do. We do. We want to do well for them. I think we do that from the time anything, not even dance, anything, math, social studies. I think a lot of times you want to do well for not always for yourself, which is not always good either, right, Hannah? I think but I think people do come back because they're not intimidated. And I hope that I don't make people feel intimidated for the most part. Sometimes I do because it's not always easy stuff. But I don't know, there's just an energy with teaching. But you got to be compassionate and you need to be able to step back and say, you know what, this isn't working, and either change it or acknowledge to the whole class that this isn't working, but I want you to keep doing it because there's a reason for me to get you there, even though this is my mess up, my screw up, whether choreographically or trying to put something together. And I've done that just recently too. It's like, wait a minute, you guys, I get that this isn't exactly right, but I want you to keep trying to get there because there's a final goal in my brain or in my head or somewhere. Um, but there's just so many aspects to teaching. There's just so many parts.
Right. Or even you'll say like with Evelyn last week, you were like, oh, or whenever 2 weeks ago, you're like, oh, she can do it. So I'm going to record it so it can be done. So we're going to make sure we get there.
Right. So yes, exactly. Because somebody actually figured it out the way I want. It's like, all right, I knew it was there, but because of my knee and stuff, I haven't been able to do stuff I haven't been able to see if it really works on me because I can't do things full out. So I never know. So yes. So and I will and I will try to praise people. I mean, that's important too. But I will also call you out and say, wait a minute, Hannah, perfect example. And Kristen, you weren't there for that, but when Hannah took this last class and she was only really supposed to work lower body and she starts doing her arms automatically, say, Hannah, stop. Just you got to stop. Or one of my students working with their rotation is trying to take a moment and say, okay, let's feel this. Let's stop and take a moment with your students. And it's going to be different students at different times. I don't know. For me, and maybe, somebody who's teaching at a studio in New York City is not going to do that because it's not as important. For me, it is important. It is important that when somebody keeps turning in at this particular, that they feel the difference, that they learn to feel the difference. And so I would rather try to, as much as I can, call somebody out because I think that's important. That's what Fred did to me. And if he hadn't done that to me on that class near the beginning of the semester, I don't know if I would have stayed in his class. But he kind of not called me out, but he brought his attention to me and and put his focus on me for that 3 minutes that then made me feel like I can do this. And literally I can do this. And I think why that's what I think. I don't know. I think from an education perspective, I think if a student doesn't feel like he or she can figure something out at whatever level, and it doesn't matter what level, but if it doesn't feel right or if it doesn't feel good, they're not going to stay with it. So I don't know. I think giving students their individual attention, if only for a moment, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Really, really important.
To show that you care and believe in them.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
For
And
sure.
that what they're doing is important. And no, don't stop. If you're, so what if you don't do it the right way? Who cares? You'll figure it out. You're going to learn from not doing it the quote unquote right way, if there is ever a right way. But you'll learn from that. And maybe your way will be something that I like better, which has also happened in class. How many times you've done, oh, wait a minute, Hannah just did it this way. I like that better. Let's try that.
Mhm.
And that's the other thing. I think teachers need to be flexible. I'm not always, but definitely flexible in what they give and how they have to change. And you have to be able to change on the fly. You have to be able to not modulate. That's music. Sorry, but you have to be able to change something to make it, for the most part, unless I say I want it this way, even though it's not right. But to be able to go, that's not working. Okay, let's finagle this. So I think teachers have to be flexible and open to making mistakes and to seeing what their kids are giving back to them, because what you guys give to me is, that's probably the biggest joy in teaching, is what I get from my students.
Mhm.
That's probably, and I think that's been all the way through SU too, is that moment of the gift that they're giving back to me, and that's, that doesn't always happen. I don't think. I really don't think it does, and that gift that my students give to me is not one of technical expertise. It's one of being fully involved and immersed in whatever it is that they're doing at that, in those moments. It doesn't have to be that it's perfect, but it's just that
Being
they're
fully,
there and they're trying and they give me that. And it's like, it's all I can ask.
yeah, being fully present.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally.
Mhm.
And I think then sometimes to get somebody fully present, you do need to challenge them. Not always, because Hannah, again, you'll take a beginning class and you'll be as present in that class as you are in a more advanced class. But I think sometimes if a more advanced student takes a beginning level class, which is good for everybody to do, I think sometimes they will lose focus.
Mm.
And that's not necessarily good, but I think that definitely happens. And I think advanced students need to learn how to go back to the beginning and find maybe what they've lost, or find a little different depth in what they're doing. But I do think other times you do need to challenge students to help them stay focused, because sometimes that helps them keep focused when they can't figure out what you're doing. So then they focus right in and go, oh crap, okay, now I got to really figure this out. So there's so many different aspects to teaching, so many different aspects, and teachers aren't perfect and they need to understand that. And the ones who think they are, to me, are not good teachers.
And I think students too respect a teacher a lot who owns up to those mistakes and doesn't try to just
Absolutely.
cover them up, but is honest with the students. I
Yep.
think that creates a more respectful
Yep.
relationship.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
that, oh my gosh, they're human. for me to
Yeah.
realize that Fred Matthews and Gary Masters were human when they would do things and go, oh, that's not right. It's like, oh, okay, it's not just me as a student not being able to figure things out. No, absolutely, absolutely. There's just, yeah, so many different things, but you have to be, I think a teacher has to allow him or herself to be a little bit vulnerable, as well as the students. But I think students are vulnerable just because they're students, and that's kind of tough sometimes. And I think then the faculty, the teacher has to be able to respect the students wherever they are, um, at whatever point in their technique or their experience. I think if a faculty doesn't respect a student, that's just as bad, because then they're not going to try to help or guide, or they're just going to let them go. They're just going to let them go across and not even pay attention, which teachers do in New York City. It's like that's what happens sometimes. But yeah.
You've definitely been touching on this a little bit, but there's just so many different educational philosophies that exist. And I think each teacher has their own special gifts that they offer. But
Absolutely.
would you kind of choose one or two things as like the most important things that makes someone a great teacher if you had to choose?
I think the first thing a teacher for me, then this is different from a walk-in studio in New York City where a teacher doesn't really even know the students. But for me, because I know kids, I think I need to believe in them. I really think that that's important, that a teacher needs to find a way to believe in his or her students. Again, for wherever they're coming from, if a student doesn't feel like somebody can believe in them and be there, it's like, what's the point? And that's not just dance, that's anything. But I think if a student knows that a teacher believes in him or her, I think the change that can happen is monumental. And it might not happen if a student, again, going back to the fact that Fred just decided to come over to me and correct whatever I was doing wrong, then I knew that he was going to believe in what I was trying to do. So I think believing in your students and in their every one of their pathways is different. So I think you need to respect and believe that each student who's there is coming from a different place. That's hard to do. That's really hard to do. And I think that that's also really important. But philosophically, teaching, if I'm not having fun and if the students aren't having fun, I don't mean, well, sometimes laughing fun, but if we're not enjoying what we're doing in that moment, truly, what is the point? I mean, and Hannah, for your dad and your grandfather and these professional football players and basketball players, not even dance, but these coaches will say, and even college, Jim Boeheim, if you don't have fun doing what it is you love to do, there's something missing. And if I, as a teacher, cannot try to find a way to promote a positive experience, and I know that teachers don't all do that, but that's huge. And maybe it's because I'm in Syracuse and I'm not in the city. But you gotta make it. You gotta find a way to make it enjoyable. Even
Yeah.
if that means challenging them to make it harder. That might be what Hannah, what somebody enjoys more is like being challenged and maybe not getting it and then trying it again. But the teacher has to see that. The teacher has to know how to meet each one of his or her students where they are.
Yeah.
Kristen, I think that's it, and believe in them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lori, I think that's great. And I think every teacher across the country, the world should implement that no matter what, whether in Syracuse, New York, or in New York City, or in California, wherever.
And they don't, and they won't. I think some of it also comes from a teacher's background, and how a teacher was taught. It's like parenting. I think that's a lot of it, and I think some of it's just the teacher's personality. For me, that's my personality, but we all know that's not everybody's personality as far as faculty is concerned. But I don't know. It's like, why teach if you can't bring your students into your world?
So, and I also think that's so interesting though for like Kristen, she just got her master's in dance education, similarly
Yeah,
to you.
which is
I
so cool. Congrats on that one.
Yeah,
Thank you.
very cool. I wonder though, like getting a bachelor's, getting a master's in dance or dance education, I wonder if that also opens your eyes and like allows you to be more receptive of, I don't know, just everything. Because when you're just a professional dancer and you don't have that extra education,
Yeah.
alongside it, maybe you don't learn those valuable lessons to then implement.
And how many professional dancers have not gone to college at all? Yes,
Right.
exactly. And that, no, I think that's very, very true. Very, very true. And yet I'm thinking there's got to be some pretty cool teachers out there who have been strong enough to go right into professional dance and are still pretty awesome teachers. But yeah, and that's the background. And even, like for me, because my undergrad was not in dance. I mean, I got a minor in dance, but my undergrad was in everything else. But I do think, so many times people will go back and they say they hated high school. Hannah, I'm thinking you didn't love your elementary years for sure. Kristen,
Yeah.
I don't know how yours were, but I loved it, and I would never ever wish that I changed just so I could maybe have been a professional dancer, because what my background gave me was so much diversity in just things that I learned and things that I did that wasn't focused on dance. However, that is then part of the reason why I'm not a professional dancer. It's like if Serena Williams did not focus on tennis her entire life, she wouldn't be where she is right now. If she would have done all these other things, I don't know that she would be where she is. LeBron James, I mean, any of them. I think, you guys, you're in a different place from me because you're moving forward into dance, and you wouldn't be able to do that if you didn't have the backgrounds that you do. So there's definitely something to be said for, even if it's just for being more focused on one area, because there's a part of it that makes you better. I think there's two sides to that story.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a gray area, and
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
pros and cons to
yep,
each. And I think people who have extensive professional careers have a lot to offer as a
absolutely.
teacher, but I think also all these different educational programs that exist now for dance pedagogy and just pedagogy in general are really opening people's minds up
Yes,
and making them think differently than you would
absolutely.
just approach as a dancer
Yep.
teaching a dance class.
Yep. It is totally different. And there's, yeah. And especially the K through 12. I mean, all the standards. It's like, what is this? There's a lot. There's a lot that has been researched, and oh my gosh, and stuff that I don't even know about anymore. And I'm to the point where I'm kind of on the other side of it. It's like, yeah, let them do it. Let the Kristens of the world take care of that kind of thing. But that is very true. But especially K through 12, when you've got the opportunity to maybe be in a school where kids aren't dancers. But if you see, I got goosebumps now. If you can give a child the gift of movement, dance, not necessarily technique specifically, but movement as a third grader, fourth grader, fifth grader, so that if nothing else, they will grow up to appreciate dance as an art. Oh, that's totally different. And to do that well, I think you need to understand curriculum and pedagogy and the standards of where this age level is and what to do with them and maybe what not to do with them. And that's huge. And that's, maybe that's what it's all about more than anything else, is like, if we can get the young ones to at least appreciate dance, then they're the ones who are going to go see New York City Ballet. They're going to go see Ohio State, contemporary dance performance. They're going to go see different things all over small little community dance companies because they grew up learning to appreciate dance, even if they didn't do it for the sake of dance, but did it for the sake of movement. That's
Right.
that's huge. Yeah.
It's that initial exposure that's
Yeah.
needed
Yep. Yep.
and it opens
And
up their
that they
world.
can do it. It's like, okay, maybe you're not going to do anything turned out, but can you somehow chasse across the floor? Or can you do movement like a basketball player, Hannah, with your final performance and final choreography? And kids, so they can relate to dance as movement, as art, as something for the soul, even, yeah, to get that initial and then hopefully then they can keep taking dance classes in their school, just to do it. Oh my gosh, that's, yeah, that's huge, and it is changing. That's definitely changing, and that's huge. And I think from the professional perspective, I think they're seeing it differently. I know the Lamone Company does. They're doing all kinds of stuff for children and education, and bringing things into the schools. And I, watch what they do, and it's not just dance, it's movement, it's fun, it's creative, it's allowing them to move how they might be able to move. And if it's different, who cares? Yeah, no, you're right. And it's changed certainly since I was there. I think that's when it was beginning, but it's so much different now and it's so much more important. Yeah. So, yeah.
And it's only going to just keep going from here too. Like you never stop learning these things.
And it's happening in
going
the
to just keep
studios.
evolving.
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to like the actual dance studios, it's there too now, where the dance standards and the educational standards and the curriculum, it's like, yeah, that never really used to be there. It's like you come in, you teach a studio, you teach a class, and that's it. And now everything that you've learned, from all of that is not just in the elementary schools or the public schools, but it's everywhere. And that's just going to change the kids' lives no matter what. Yeah. Yeah.
For sure. And just to get more kids dancing. I mean,
Yep.
because movement is that like universal language, and people say,
Yeah.
oh, I can't dance. Like you can, you just gotta just try.
Yeah. Yeah. You just got to try instead of them looking at it going, well, or it's weird, or I don't want to see that. It's not football. Well, you know what? What those guys do on the football field, you know what? Let's make that into a dance. Let's do something where it can go across all of those different areas. But yeah, to get them to understand and appreciate dance as an art, it doesn't get any better than that. It really doesn't.
For sure.
I don't know.
Thank you so much, Laurie, for being on our podcast. It was such a pleasure to hear from you.
You are so welcome. Oh my gosh, this was fun. It's kind of fun to reminisce and go back and go, yeah, where did I come from?
Definitely.
But hopefully, if somebody listens, maybe they'll say, I can do it a different way, and still do it well, and I can take a different route and still do it well. And
yeah, you're a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I think that's important for people to hear. Yes. Well, you are very welcome.
Yes, thank you so much. It was wonderful to learn so much about you. I've heard wonderful things from Hannah. It's great to learn more from you and your background.
Yes,
well,
thank you.
You are very welcome.
Thanks for tuning into Abundance. We appreciate your support. We hope to have PK'd your interest. Feel free to contact us at abundancepodcast5678@gmail.com and give us feedback on what you'd like to hear. That is abundance without parentheses. Go dance yourself silly. Bye for now.
A special thank you to Richard D. Fiore for our lovely podcast tune and Matt Mellish for our cover art.